Well, the first question would be, we are just finished the first half of the year. Well, what about its how it has behaved, how things have gone so far this year?
Well,
What's your impression?
Yeah, I think you've seen our results. You know, we gave our first quarter results when when we reported what was it, 71% increase in revenues, and about 33% increase in organic growth, so like for like. So the balance was about half and half in terms of growth organic. You know that we and then by April we reported growth of 91%. So you don't have to be an Einstein to figure out what happened in April. So we went from 71% to 91% in 1 month. And although we didn't give an indication of the organic growth, you can assume that it was, you know, roughly half. So, you know, we've seen a very significant, as I said, Manuel, a few weeks ago, I've been in the business for 45 years and I have never, ever in my career seen organic growth at that level. So, you know, our business, the number of people in our business is now 5,500 people. This time last year, it was about 2,500. So we've added 3,000 people at a time when the holding companies have probably fired about 45, 50,000 people. So, you know, we are growing whilst they are declining. And, you know, it's something that is very difficult for them to come to terms with. We'll talk more about that, obviously. So the answer, when we started the year, we said our organic growth we were targeting 25%. When we got to the end of Q1, we said 30%. And when we got to the end of April, we said 35%. We will have our half-year results at the beginning of September, and you'll see what happened in the first half then. But you can understand from the figures that we're doing extremely well. I mean, we're growing at rates which are 3 or 4 times what the very best in the holding companies will be doing. So you know, the fact that we're just focused on digital, as you know, is an advantage. But you know, none of the holding companies can show growth in any of their areas at any level of size, big or small, that matches what we're doing. So, you know, we're doing extremely well. I mean, we could always do better. So on the organic side, we're growing, as we've said to the market, by 35%. Actually, if you do your maths, you will figure out that we're growing faster than that. Yeah. And then on the deal side, we continue to add companies to the group, and we have signed 4 exclusive LOIs. So you will see news of further additions to the company very shortly, probably before we announce our half-year results. We're also in the process of negotiating a 350 million euro term loan, which will give us added firepower for deals. But you know, the market capitalization of the company is now over $5 billion. So we started less than 3 years ago at 0, and we're now $5 billion. The market is expecting about 575 million pounds of revenues this year, gross revenues, net revenues 525, and EBITDA of about 105 to 110 million pounds. So, you know, we've done very well. our biggest client is Google. Our second biggest client is an NDA'd telecoms company, but you can think of who that is. The third one is BMW Mini. The fourth is Mondelez, and the fifth is Google. About 50% of our revenues are in tech. So we have a very strong position in the tech industry. So we're doing very well. We have two tailwinds. The first tailwind is the recovery in the global economy. This year, GDP growth will be about 5 to 6%, and next year about 4 to 5%, driven by the fiscal and monetary stimulus. The second tailwind is digital transformation, which has been accelerated by the pandemic. So, I think what's really important, Manuel, to emphasize is that there are two worlds here. There are two planets. There's sort of planet analog, which is the holding companies. And then there's planet digital, which is companies like S4 with the digital part of the industry. As you're at Reason Why, as opposed to being, at a traditional media. So you know exactly what I mean. So one world is no growth or slow growth, and one world is rapid growth. So the second tailwind is digital transformation, and the pandemic has driven digital transformation faster, both at the consumer level, the media level, and the enterprise level.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned acquisitions, and there will be some announcements soon about new ones.
We call them mergers, Manuel, because we're not looking for people to sell out. We don't want people. We never have I had a conversation yesterday with a very good company, and we made it clear that the first part of the conversation is always, if you want to sell your company, we're not interested. If you want to buy in to what we're doing, which is creating the new model, the new advertising and marketing services model, and disrupting the old, then that's what we should do. Okay.
Are you proactive in that field? Are you looking for companies, or just jump to the occasion? How you?
No. We're very active. Scott Spirit, who joined me from WPP, worked with me at WPP for 15 years. He's based in Singapore. We're very active. We work with our partners, with the platforms, with the hardware companies, and with the software companies to find opportunities. And we get a lot of inbound, but we're very, very active. I mean, there was a survey yesterday by one of the M&A firms. We are the most active in terms of M&A in the marketing services industry.
Okay. What about Spain? Any particular plans? What is?
Well, you know that we have our operations, both Media Monks and Mighty Hive in Spain, and we're growing very rapidly. We've just green-lighted a new building in Madrid. We will have a unitary building in Madrid, and we're growing very rapidly there. We'll be about 200 people very shortly. So we are growing rapidly on the back of the wins that we made in BMW Mini and Mondelez in particular, but other clients too. So Spain is important, and it's in the nexus of Germany and Italy and Spain and France and the UK. I mean, the 5 major European markets are very important to us, and we continue to develop our business there. From a global point of view, whilst we're building our business aggressively in Europe, like in Germany and in Spain and in Italy, and we recently went into France with Dare.Win, and I was in Paris last week, and it's they're doing very well. Whilst we're doing that and doing it well, I mean we are also looking aggressively at North and South America and Asia Pacific. Currently, we're 70% North the Americas, 20% EMEA, and 10% Asia, and we want to be 40% North and South America, 40% Asia, and 20% EMEA. But this year in Europe, we will double the size of our business, and about half of that growth will come from organic, and half of that growth will come from deals. So we this year in the first half, you'll see we've almost doubled our business in EMEA.
Great. Okay. Well, you've mentioned Media Monks, which is kind of banner company for S4. Looking for them, what kind of services are they bringing onto the market? What kind of briefings they receive? Are they playing in the advertising field, or what kind of player they are?
Well, we do two things at the moment: digital advertising content, which is Media Monks, and data and analytics and digital media, which is Mighty Hive. We will probably enter a third area, which is technology services. So we will have if we do that, which I think we will, in the next couple of months, we will have a full suite of services to compete against Accenture. I mean, our principal competition is Accenture. We compete a little bit with the holding companies. We take business from the holding companies. I mean, they don't like it. They're embarrassed by it. They try to hide it. But you know, if you look at BMW Mini and Mondelez as examples, that those came from the holding companies. But essentially, our competition really is Accenture. And I would say Globant as well. You know, Globant, as you know, bought Habitant in Spain. I think primarily because Habitant's biggest client was BBVA, and Globant has a big relationship with BBVA. We took a look at Habitant, but we passed. We didn't think it was right for us. But you know, we will, as I say, shortly. So our competition really is sort of Accenture, then the holding companies, bits of the holding company, not the whole. So a Huge, an RGA, an AKQA, a VML, and then maybe a Wyden and Kennedy. I would say those are at that level. And then you have the specialists like Oliver on the content side, or Jellyfish on the digital media side. So you know, but primarily our competition is Accenture, and our competition, and what we've seen with Accenture is that they have all these assets. They've fallen into the same trap as the holding companies, in that they haven't consolidated their creative assets. I mean, we just recently hired the head of digital media from Accenture in Germany. And she was telling me that, you know, there are 16 creative brands, including Droga, right? If you like, if I was Accenture, I would say, let's call everything Droga, or call everything Accenture Interactive and get on with it. But they have this fragmented approach. But our chief competition, as I say, and Accenture is 200 billion market cap. We're 5 billion, so we're a peanut in comparison. But you know, we have an interesting opportunity, and as I said, I think within the next couple of months we will be into the technology services area. Okay.
Well, it's been going on the conversation, your point of view about the holding companies, which is a model that you work within for a very long time. Now you're being quite critical with that. Some people would say you're cynical about it. How do you analyze the situation?
Well, I still have my shares in WPP for good or bad. They're 25% lower than the day I left. and it was certainly a good move to go to S4. Look, the problem with the holding company is that there are two big problems. The first is that the holding company model was created really, people think about WPP, they think about Saatchi's, they think about Omnicom. It really goes back to the 1950s.
Yeah, with Marion Harper, yeah.
And Marion Harper and IPG, exactly. So this has been around for 70 years and it's past its sell-by date. McKinsey say the average life of an S&P 500 company or FTSE 100 company is about 17 years. And if that's the case, which I'm sure if McKinsey says it is, that model is no longer fit for purpose. So that's one thing.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing is that in the holding companies, they are run by people who really don't have any great enthusiasm. They tend to be bureaucrats. They tend to be paper pushers. And they tend to be people who have no financial interest or very limited financial interest in their firms. I mean, I think I still own more shares than the whole of the board of WPP. So I don't think they're really interested in maintaining their jobs or changing their job. You saw the chief people officer, presents at a capital markets day last week, and then this week leaves to go to ServiceNow. So, it's just a job. And, when we talk about independence, Manuel, what defines an independent, in my view, is not that they're not one of the holding companies. It's that there is this unification of ownership and control. So that a true independent is where the management own the company. That is the critical difference. And I think that creates a different, that from the companies that you see in Spain.
Mm-hmm.
And the attitude is very different, where the people who run the company own the company as opposed to being management. That's nothing wrong with being a manager, but it's a different mind frame.
Yeah, okay. Any lingering feuds with WPP, or everything is solved more or less? Or?
I think we compete very aggressively and we win, I think, most of the time. I'm not aware of any time that we've lost against them, actually.
Yeah, I mean, on a personal level.
No, I think my only advice to anybody, Manuel, is be very careful who your chairman is.
Okay, thank you. I take note.
You know that.
Apart from the thing, let's put it in that way, do you miss something about your previous lifestyle? I mean, the kind of things you did at WPP, the style of life you led there, or you're happier now?
Well, I mean, it's obviously different when you start with a clean sheet of paper. The good news is you're not a prisoner of the past. The bad news is you don't have the scale. Now, we're up now to, as I said, about 5,500 people in 31 countries with a market cap of 5 billion. WPP is in 113 countries. We won't ever be in 113 countries. I think the maximum will be about 35, and that's an advantage because you can hub with new technology. You can hub in regions. We won't ever be at 200,000 people or 113 or 100,000 people. They've fired a lot of people recently, which is sad. So we won't be 100,000 people. I mean, our revenues now are getting near to $1 billion. We'll probably cross $1 billion in fairly short order. We're number 100. We're about 125 in the FTSE. So we want to become a FTSE 100 company. So, you know, in terms of scale, the nature of our business in digital is very different. We have higher revenues per head, higher productivities. Technology drives what we do. We're looking for growth. So we tend to look at the sky, whereas I think the holding companies tend to look at their boots, if you understand what I mean. So I think the mentality that we have is very different. We have a much more entrepreneurial, growth-orientated strategy and mentality, and I think that's very different. I think the problem in the holding companies is it's always about cutting and slashing and focusing on cost instead of focusing on revenue growth. There's also, I have to say, a lot of talk. You know, the holding companies are very good at issuing press releases, but you have to look at what they do rather than what they say. I mean, for example, one of the holding companies was going on last week about their values and how clients had to align with their values. And I think the CEO of the company forgot to look at his client list.
Yeah.
And I think he has to be very careful about what he says, or he has to resign certain clients that don't reflect the values that he was talking about. And I think that's a serious issue. So there is a lot of virtue signaling inside the holding companies. They are not, you know, we are 40% people of color. We are roughly 50-50 in terms of gender, not as much as the senior levels. And the two things that we have to work on are women at our senior levels. And then the second is our Afro-American Black population is about 5-6%, and it should be at least 13%. We're very good on Hispanic, and we're very good on Asian American, but we have to up our game, if I can put it like that.
Yeah.
With the, you know, we have about 1,000 people in California, and about 5 or 6% of them are Black.
Yeah.
And it should, that's about right for California. But in New York, where we have a smaller number of people, but it's still very important to us, it's about 500 people. You know, we're also around 5 or 6%, and we should be 25%. So we've committed to representing the communities in which we operate in. So we have to drive. But generally, when, you know, every month we compare ourselves to the tech companies, and we compare ourselves to the holding companies. We compare very well to them, but it's not good enough. So,
yeah.
But you know, going back to the holding companies, I think there's a lot of jaw, and there's not a lot of war, if I can put it that way.
Yeah. So there's too much conversation, no?
Yeah, there's a lot of talking and paper shuffling and press releases. Yeah. There's almost a press release a day, but it's really meaningless.
Yeah, but at least you should be traveling less, you know, that you did a few years ago.
Well, yes. I mean, I've been to the Middle East. I've been to America. I've been to Europe in the last few months. But it's not as easy as it used to be. I have to say that traveling internationally is easier in a way because there are fewer people. Within the United States, you know, things. I was there a few weeks ago. I went to Los Angeles and New York, and I'll be going back again in a few days' time. And I think, you know, things are not back to normal because they will never go back to normal. Yeah. But you know, I think to your point, I remember there was a phone conversation I was listening to a year ago. There were 3 CEOs on the call. One was from a hospitality hotel company, one was from an airline, and one was from a fast foods company. And the guy from the hotel company said, of course, we will go back to booking hotels. The guy from the airline said, of course, we'll go back to booking flights. And the guy from the fast food company said, my travel budget has gone to 0. It will never go back to more than 50%. And I think, you know, that was that's the key thing that you know, and I will be the same. I will travel less times. I will probably go for long. I will probably go for longer. So instead of going to Singapore for 2 or 3 days, you'll go there, you'll spend more time there, and then spend more time in the region. The other thing the pandemic has shown is you can try and run a business from various parts of the world. It doesn't have to be, you know, getting into a hotel room at 11 o'clock at night and taking a call in the middle of the night. You know, your life can be different. I actually have to say, Manuel, I think companies have been better run in the pandemic because people at the center have not interfered as much in the business.
Okay, that's a good insight. You should elaborate on that. I think there's something there.
Well, I think it's true. I think, you know, the country managers and regional managers and city managers have been given more room to exercise their discretion and their authority. There's been less travel from the center and less interference, and I think that's been good.
Yeah. Okay. You talk about Accenture. Let's bring Deloitte to the conversation now. A few years ago,
we don't see Deloitte much at all.
No.
I mean, it may be that because they're a private partnership.
Yeah.
And it's difficult for them to compete, but we see very little of them, and they've lost people. I mean, I remember we had a strategy session with the Deloitte people in 2017. And I remember we had the chairman of Deloitte Interactive or whatever it was called, and he left shortly after. Yeah. And then the CEO was there, and he's now running Ogilvy. He decamped from Deloitte. I think my view is that that's a mistake, and that he won't be running Ogilvy in 2 or 3 years' time.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Well, one of the things that we've been talking about, some of the changes that the pandemic has brought to, of course, everyone's lives, personal and corporate and social life. One of the big things is working from home. And now there's kind of debate, at least in Spain, and some CEOs and managers of companies are a little bit worried because a lot of people doesn't want to come back to the offices, and they are thinking about how to deal with the situation. What's your take on it? What is there an S4 position on that, or how are you dealing with this situation?
Well, I mean, in theory, Manuel, as I am 76, I should be part of the command and control school. So, but I think that the things that happened in the pandemic were not new. I mean, the pandemics that happened before. We've seen pandemics, Spanish flu in 1917, 18. But I was getting more at the trends. So city centers were becoming more expensive, more crowded. There was more homelessness. People wanted to work remotely. The digital economy is about, to some extent, working from home and working remotely. So all these things were encouraging greater fluidity and flexibility. And you know here in the UK that the Prime Minister has said, we should all go back to work on July the 19th. We'll see. I mean, there has been an uplift in the rate of COVID infections, and there is some pressure on the hospital, on the NHS system, and we'll see how that pans out. And I know the same thing is happening in a way in Spain. And as we open up, and as we get into the winter, certainly in the Northern Hemisphere, that may become more of a problem. So with all those caveats, I have to say that we will be flexible. So we will have people in the office probably. I mean, when we were looking at the Madrid office, we're anticipating the new one. We're anticipating 60% utilization, so that people will be in the office for 3 days a week. that there will be more flexibility in commuting time. There will be more flexibility in working time. And there will be more flexibility in our general approach. Our model, we have three models, really. The outsourcing model to the agency, the embedded model, where we put people into the client. And then thirdly, the in-housing model, where we work with the client to displace ourselves. You know, the holding companies don't like that because they think it's going to put them out of business. And in those three areas, you know, there is room for greater flexibility. So the answer to your question is that we will not have a fixed model. We will have three, you know, a much more flexible model with 3 days probably in, with flexibility on those days, probably phased in, and then much more working from home, much more variable commuting times. And you know, in Asia, I would say people generally have less resources at home, smaller homes sometimes, living with their parents, living with young children. So they would tend to be in the office more, maybe more than 3 days a week, maybe 5 days a week. In Europe and the Americas, I think there will be more flexibility. So net, I don't believe that if you can come into a restaurant, you have to come into the office.
No. Okay. Well, you talk a little bit now about the situation of your country. How do you see it? How do you see how the climate, and I mean not the temperature, the climate, how people is feeling? They're in good spirits or not? How do you?
I mean, getting to the final of the Euro 2020 or Euro 2021 has had a remarkable. I had an email from a journalist in Germany to say, isn't the Euro 2020 or 2021 a disaster? I said, no, it's not a disaster. Here we think it's very good. It must be because Germany got knocked out for once. So I would say the mood, and you know, the vaccination program here has been very well executed. The government did not do a good job early on, but did a good job with a woman called Kate Bingham, ran the vaccination procurement process and did an extremely good job in that area. I would say, look, there's a lot of worry about Brexit. You know, I was a Remainer, but the electorate has spoken. I am very, you know, I think there is a route for Britain, what I call Singapore, or what people call Singapore on Thames, or Singapore on steroids. But you know, I worry about whether we have the resources to do it. We have to, you know, this is all apple pie and motherhood, but we have to have strong education programs, reskilling programs for the impact of globalization. We have to have a leveling up, as the Prime Minister calls it, across the country. It has to take in the North and the East and the West, as well as the South. We have the problem about, you know, whether Scotland will be independent, and whether Northern Ireland will reunite with IRA. So, I mean, all these issues, apart from the pandemic, apart from climate change, apart from diversity, equity, inclusion, apart from inequality, all these things are major issues, and we have to deal with Brexit at the same time. I'm very worried about it. I worry about whether we're going to do enough education, reskilling, whether we have enough labor mobility, whether we have enough hard infrastructure and soft infrastructure, you know, 5G as well as ports and airports. But I think there is a way through. There's an opportunity, and you know, S4 is a very good example of it. If we can build a major global enterprise, you know, we're already 125 in the FTSE. If we can get into the FTSE 100 and build we are global already. You know, we are getting traction, we are growing fast, but if we can if we can build an even more successful company, that will be a good example of what Britain can do, or what somebody can do, or a group of people can do based in London, even in, an isolated or more isolated Britain. But it will not be an easy journey. I remember when Lee Kuan Yew took Singapore out of the alliance with Malaysia, people said Singapore would never make it, and look what's happened. They've done a brilliant job. So there is an opportunity. It is a different opportunity. It's not the opportunity I would have chosen. I would have rather been part of the EU bloc. But as somebody said to me, we've come out of Europe and now we want to win the Euro Cup.
Yeah, yeah, that's well, you can see a lot of things out there, and those facts, a lot of interpretation. There's been much talk since last year about how the pandemic was going to change us as persons, how it was going to change societies and the way of living and the way of thinking and the way of worrying, the way of everything. Do you think that's it's being for real? Do you feel a different person? Do you feel the society is different? Do you think people is thinking and feeling and behaving differently?
Well, I think, look, and so I talk for myself. I think, I think that the pandemic for me has been a time where, you can think more. It's not has not been as frenetic. I've been able to sit for, in one place for most of the time. Yeah. For, 15 months, 18 months, and it gives you a chance to reflect. So I would say, rather than getting into a hotel room at 11 o'clock at night and taking a call at 3 in the morning sort of thing. So in that sense, and you can re-engage with family and friends and everything else. So in that sense, yes, but I think, Manuel, it's a really interesting point. What I feel is there's a tremendous amount of disruption. That what we're seeing at the moment, I see it with clients. A lot of clients are changing jobs. There are a huge number of reviews at the moment, reviews of accounts. So what we're seeing is a tremendous amount of dissatisfaction. I think people are reviewing what they're doing personally, and they're reviewing what they're doing from a business point of view, and they want to make change. So for a disruptor like S4, it's an ideal environment. There couldn't be a better environment, because what it's saying is we should change. Yeah. The pandemic was such a shock to the system that change has almost become a habit. So for a disruptor like us, it's really good news. For the holding companies, I think it's trouble, because if you look at WPP for a minute, they have a huge amount of billings. They're defending Unilever, they're defending Chanel, they're defending Facebook, they have all these accounts to defend, let alone try and build new business. So generally the holding companies who are entrenched and part of the old world are in a very difficult position. And the pandemic, I think, has thrown into relief all the questions that people were asking before, and have accelerated the thinking around them. So I think there's huge disruption at the moment at a professional level and a personal level.
Okay. What about clients? What's the impression they give? They give you an impression they are fearful, they're excited, they're cautious.
They're very uncertain. That if there was a marketing VIX index, there's a VIX index in the stock markets of uncertainty. If there was a marketing VIX index, it would be off the charts. Google's decision on the deprecation of the third-party cookies. Google's even though they delayed it for 2 years. Google's decision on IDFA and IP addresses all means that VIX index, that uncertainty has gone through the roof.
Yeah.
And so the answer to your question, it goes back to what I said about people re-looking at what they're doing and how they're doing it. All of this has created tremendous levels of uncertainty, huge levels of uncertainty. And clients are looking for guidance, they're looking for help. So our digital data and analytics and digital media practice has been extremely strong. And our digital media business has been extremely strong, as has our content business. And the reason is people are experimenting and they're trying to find out, get advice on what they should do and how they should do it. So there's continuous reinvention in a very turbulent world.
Okay. How would you define the current role that the big tech companies are playing now in the marketing field?
Look, Manuel, they're fundamental. If you look at the media market at 550 to 600 billion, Google, if you take Google's first quarter revenues, they probably will go from 180 billion of ad revenues to 240 billion this year. Facebook will go from 80 to 110. Amazon probably go from 25 to 35 billion. That's 100 billion of incremental revenue flowing to those three platforms. ByteDance, TikTok is up to, I think it's 27 or 32 billion. So they've broken through. So look, whether we like it or not, or whether governments like it or not, those are the dominant platforms. They will, I mean, just look at YouTube. Again, if you take YouTube's first quarter numbers, they will probably reach 30 billion of ad revenues this year, which is the same level as Netflix subscription. So you have a subscription model and you have a ad-based model. So look, they are here, they will be stay. They will, in my view, they will not grow by acquisition as much because of the regulator. You know, even Amazon's acquisition of MGM will be closely looked at. And that's only in the context of Amazon, it's petty cash, it's only 10 billion, but it's very small, but it will be looked at. You know, they're poking the regulatory bear. So they will grow organically rather than, you know, Facebook will take on Clubhouse. Facebook will, and Instagram will look at closely at what Snap is doing. I mean, Snap is very successful, but it's only 2.5 billion of ad revenues so far. This year maybe 3.5. So we'll see. But you know, the fact those are now in China for different reasons. Maybe you also have, you see what happened to Didi on its IPO. We've seen what's happened with Jack Ma and Alibaba and Tencent. So the environment, you know, is a very heavy regulatory environment, but the tech companies know that. And the decision by Google around cookies and third-party cookies was partly driven by driven mainly by their acknowledgement that privacy was an important issue and they had to do something about it. So I think, you know, they are trillion-dollar companies. Facebook has hit $1 trillion. So you've got, you know, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, Google, all well over $1 trillion. Facebook now hitting $1 trillion, despite all the regulatory threats to them. So I think they will continue to grow. There will be alternatives. But I don't think those alternatives, I think it would be very difficult for those alternatives to get sufficient momentum. So that I think those platforms will be here to stay. Our role is to evaluate those platforms, the new ones, the new hardware companies and new software companies.
And what about these companies that are getting funding from venture capitalists all the time, and they try to impose a new business model, but they seem not to be able to make money, but they're getting money all the time for investors. I mean, I think in Uber or whatever, Tom Goodwin was writing about this the other day. Do you think there will be a bubble like the .com one?
Well, you know, there's always, if I see it in the private equity markets, the valuations, you know, the average EBITDA multiple for a transaction is about 13 times. It was about 9.5 times. The average leverage, used to be about 4 times, it's now about 6 times EBITDA. So valuations have been pushed up. We can compete against those. On the deal side of the business, Accenture is our main client competition. Private equity is our main deal competition. But we're very different to private equity. We say to people, you have to buy into what we're doing and create the new model. We're a strategic investor. We're not a financial investor. You join us, we can help you. We can really help you grow your business. So it's a very different approach, and we don't do earn-outs. We think earn-outs create fragmentation and duplication, and what we really want to do is get unitary brand. So, our first principle is digital only. Second is the holy trinity of data, driving the creation of content at scale, personalization at scale, and distributing out through digital media in a continuous loop. Third principle is faster, better, cheaper. And then the final principle is a unitary structure. So we're one brand, one company going to market, as I said, as faster, better, cheaper. So it's a very different approach to the holding company model. But our view is that is the best model. And on the VC side, there is a lot of money, particularly in America, to support new ideas. And we've got some interesting thoughts in that area too. We don't do VC and S4. We have, the criteria for deals. One is very strong sales growth, strong margins or a path to margins, management own the company or a big chunk of the company. And fourthly, we have no exposure to technological change. We're part of the service economy. We do not want to be vulnerable. I don't want to wake up one morning to find that we've been disintermediated technologically. We're part of the service there. So that's really, really critically important.
Okay, so this new business model, what do you think? I mean, it's for real, or just it's a way for managers or founders to get money?
What do you mean?
I mean, companies like Uber or whatever that are getting a lot of money.
No. They're providing fundamental services for consumers. The issue for them is, can they get, it's like Netflix. Will it have to take advertising? I think it will. I think YouTube, Spotify has a service which is subsidized by advertising and it's cheaper. And then a service which is no advertising, more expensive. So you have to get a balance between subscription and advertising and sponsorship. And so I think there's room for a mixed model. No, when you talk about Uber, these are services that consumers want and the consumers are prepared to pay for. The question is, how do you get the model right from a profit point of view over the long term?
Okay. Well, let's continue talking about financial markets, but a little bit off topic. You're a keen observer of them, and what do you think about cryptocurrencies? Are you interested in them, Bitcoin or whatever?
I have no knowledge. I think I understand blockchain, and I'm a fan of blockchain, but crypto, I don't understand it, and I don't wish to understand it.
Okay, great. Well, last 2 questions, Martin. I don't want to take much any more of your time. Any plans to write a memoir or your biography or kind of remembrance or whatever?
No, only when I'm dead and I can say what I really think.
Okay, and anyone has approached you with the intention of writing your biography? Any proposals?
Lots of people, and I've said no. They want to make films, and I don't want to do it.
Okay. Well, I will think about it.
So some of our people have put together a proposal for Netflix, but I don't think so.
Okay, that would be good content.
Not unless we can take advertising.
Okay, but let's talking about books. And just to finish, if you have read something recently that you think you can recommend that is particularly interesting or inspiring or funny or whatever, and you can recommend.
There's this one here, it's just sitting on my desk, which is kind of where you see it. Niall Ferguson, the historian. It's called Doom.
Yeah.
The politics.
Very well because of the It's Nile
The, the politics of catastrophe.
Okay. Okay, great.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thanks a
Manuel.
million.